Good morning, girls. Today we begin with the fifth chapter of history, the Delhi Sultanate, on page 30. Now, the Delhi Sultanate was an Islamic empire which was based in Delhi. So, here in this chapter, we'll be discussing about the different dynasties which belonged to the period of the Delhi Sultanate and also the different rulers, the famous rulers of these dynasties. So, we'll begin with the class. The period between 1206 and 1526 CE in Indian history is known as the period of the Delhi Sultanate. So, the period of Delhi Sultanate in India was between 1206 and 1526 CE. The rulers of various dynasties who ruled during this period were called sultans. So, the rulers who ruled during the period of the Delhi Sultanate were known as the sultans. Since these rulers ruled from their capital at Delhi, this period is called Delhi Sultanate. Now, this period is known as the period of Delhi Sultanate because most of the rulers, most of the sultans, they ruled from their capital at Delhi. During this period of over 300 years, 5 dynasties ruled from Delhi. So, the period of Delhi Sultanate, it extended for about 300 years and 5 dynasties ruled from Delhi. These were the Slave Dynasty 1206 to 1290, the Khalji Dynasty 1290 to 1320, the Tughlaq Dynasty 1320 to 1414, the Sayyid Dynasty 1414 to 1451, the Lodhi Dynasty 1451 to 1526. So these were the 5 dynasties who ruled from Delhi during the period of the Delhi Sultanate. Sources of history. The manuscripts, inscriptions, coins and architecture provide a lot of information about the Delhi Sultans. Now we get a lot of information about the Delhi Sultans and about the Delhi Sultanate period from the manuscripts. Manuscripts are books or documents which are written by hand, which are handwritten. They are not printed, but they are handwritten. So we get from manuscripts, then we get information from inscriptions. Inscriptions are writings that are cut into something. They are carved into stones or metals. So we get information from inscriptions, then we get information from coins and architecture of that period. But more than these sources, the histories Tawarik, written in Persian, constitute an important place among the sources about Delhi Sultanate. So apart from the sources, apart from the manuscripts and inscriptions, coins and architecture, we get more information from the histories. The histories, they were known as the Tawariks and they were written in Persian. So these histories which were written in Persian give us more information about the period of the Delhi Sultanate. These histories were written by learned men like secretaries, administrators, poets, and courtiers who both recollected events and advised the rulers. So these histories, these Sawariks, they were written by men like secretaries, administrators, poets, and courtiers. Now, courtier is a person who accompanies or who advises the king or the queen. So the information, these histories were written by these men. However, these authors often wrote for the sultans in the hope of getting rich awards, but the main aim of these authors, the main aim of these learned men who wrote the histories was to get rich awards, was to get more wealth from the sultans. These handwritten works were decorated with gold or silver to highlight important words and passages and were called illuminated manuscripts. So these histories, these handwritten works, they were decorated with gold or silver. They were manuscripts, they were handwritten books which were decorated with gold or silver, and they were known as illuminated manuscripts. Now, illuminated manuscripts, they were handwritten books that were decorated with gold or silver, gold or silver to highlight the important works. Now you can see here below there's a picture given. You can see first they prepare the paper, then they write on those papers, and then they decorate the important parts. They decorate the important words and passages with gold or silver. They highlight the important words and passages, and then they bind these papers into books or documents. So this is how they made these books and documents. Now we'll move on to the Slave Dynasty. The Slave Dynasty was the first dynasty in the period of the Delhi Sultanate, and it was between 1206 to 1290. The earliest rulers of Delhi were called Mamluk Sultans. So the earliest ruler, the first rulers of Delhi, they were known as the Mamluk Sultans. The word Mamluk is an Arabic word that means owned. So the word Mamluk, it is an Arabic word. It comes from Arabic and it means owned. Since these sultans were earlier either the slaves of the Turks or were the sons of the slaves, they were called Mamluk Sultans. Now, why were these rulers known as Mamluk Sultans? Because these rulers, they were first, in the beginning, initially, they were either the slaves of the Turks or they were the sons of the slaves of these Turks. And that is how they got the name Mamluk Sultans. The word Mamluk, it means owned. So these rulers, they were initially owned by their masters, and that is why they are known as the Mamluk Sultans. Qutbuddin Aibak. The slave dynasty was founded by Qutbuddin Aibak, a slave of Muhammad Ghori. So we had learnt about Qutbuddin Aibak in the last chapter. We learnt about Aibak. We learnt about Muhammad Ghori. When we learnt about Muhammad Ghori and about his invasions, we learnt that after every invasion, after every conquest, Muhammad Ghori would return to his country, but he would leave his slave, and his slave's name was Qutbuddin Aibak. He would leave his slave behind to take care of his empire, and this slave was Qutbuddin Aibak. So the slave dynasty, it was founded by Qutbuddin Aibak. Since Ghori had no sons, Aibak became the ruler after the death of his master in 1206. Now Muhammad Ghori, he did not have any sons, he did not have any successors. So after the death of Muhammad Ghori, Aibak took over the rule, and he became the rule in 1206. He became the sultan by virtue of his courage and ability. So, Qutbuddin Aibak, he was a very good person. He was a person who had good moral principles, and he had good behavior. So, because of his good moral principles and behavior, he became the sultan, and he was very courageous, and he was a very able ruler. After the death of Muhammad Ghori, Aibak acted with foresight and separated Delhi Sultanate from the Ghurid Empire. So after Muhammad Ghori died, Aibak, he acted with foresight. Foresight means it is the ability to foresee. It is the ability to prepare wisely for the future. So he was able to foresee the future, and he separated Delhi Sultanate from the Ghurid Empire. This helped India from being drawn into Central Asian conflicts. So since he separated Delhi Sultanate from the Ghurid Empire, it was not included in the Central Asian conflicts. There were many Central Asian conflicts, and Delhi Sultanate was not included in this Central Asian conflicts because Aibak had already separated the Delhi Sultanate from the Ghurid Empire. It also enabled Delhi Sultanate to develop independently. So since the Delhi Sultanate was separated from the Ghurid Empire, it enabled the Sultanate to develop independently, to become more independent. Besides being a brave warrior, Aibak was a just and impartial king. So we had discussed in the last chapter that Aibak was a very brave warrior. He was a very brave soldier because even after the death, even at the present, in the absence of Muhammad Ghori, Aibak was able to conquer many places. So he was a very brave warrior, and he was also a very just and impartial king. Impartial means one who is not partial. He was a very fair and a very just king. He was liberal and gave large sums of money in charity. So he was a very generous person. He was a person who had good moral principles. He was a very just and impartial king. He was a very generous person, and he gave large amount of money in charity. That is why he is also known as Lakh Baksh, or giver of lakhs. Aibak, Qutbuddin Aibak, he is known as Lakh Baksh, or the giver of lakhs, because he was a very generous person and he used to give large amount of money in charity. He built the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque in Delhi and Adai Ka Chopra at Ajmer. So these are the two famous mosques. One is the Quwwat-ul-Islam Mosque, which is in Delhi, and Adai Din Ka Chopra, which is in Ajmer. So these two mosques were built by Aibak. He started the construction of the famous Qutub Minar but died before it could be completed. So the construction of the Qutub Minar, it was started by Aibak, but before it was completed, before the work was completed, he died before the work of the Qutub Minar was completed. He died in 1210 due to a fall from his horse while playing Chaugan or polo. So before the construction of the Qutub Minar was completed, Qutbuddin Aibak, he passed away. He died in 1210 due to a fall from his horse while he was playing Chaugan. Now Chaugan is a game which is similar to polo. You can see the person on a horseback with a stick in his hand, and the person should keep hitting the ball which is on the ground. So it is similar to polo, and while he was playing Chaugan, he fell from this horseback and he died in 1210. You can see here the picture of Qutbuddin Aibak, and below you can see the Qutub Minar. So it was the construction of the Qutub Minar. It was started by Qutbuddin Aibak, but he died before the Qutub Minar was completed. So this is about Qutbuddin Aibak. Now, so today we learnt about the Delhi Sultanate, about the different dynasties. We learned which were the different dynasties which belonged to the Delhi Sultanate period. Then the sources of history, and also about the Slave Dynasty and the founder of the Slave Dynasty, Qutbuddin Aibak. So that's all for today, girls. Thank you.